quantitative easing has also come to an end. The era of relatively low interest rates in the last decade has come to an end. Now, especially since the beginning of last year, we have seen the US Fed leading the Western world in pushing up interest rates. I say the Western world very deliberately because the country which has resisted this pushing up of the interest rates has actually been Japan. Japan has refused to push up its interest rates. Finally, Governor of the Bank of Japan, Kuroda, was just recently replaced a few months ago by Ueda. And Ueda has already indicated that he will change policy. But let us remember that for many, many decades, Japan has relied on low interest rates to ensure economic growth. Now, that period of rapid economic growth came to an end from around 1989. Okay? And there are many reasons which we can't get into right now. But the point I want to make right now is that interest rates are going up. Why are interest rates going up? Interest rates are going up because of a faith, of a belief which is not based on any serious economic analysis, but a belief that somehow or other you have to bring down inflation to 2%. And how do you bring down inflation to 2%? You do it by increasing interest rates, because increasing interest rates means that there will be less investments, there will be less consumption, because you cannot afford. So that is the basic logic of raising interest rates, to quell consumption, to bring down investments and consumption. Will that bring down inflation? Yes and no. It will suppress consumption. It will suppress investments. But look at the sources of inflation which we face in the world today. What are the main sources of inflation? The number one source is the supply-side disruptions. Supply-side disruptions which we have seen since the beginning of the Second Cold War, from the time of Barack Obama, continued, increased by Donald Trump, and continued by Joe Biden. Okay, so we have now a world of where international antagonisms are considered to be legitimate, and countries have been forced to take sides in this new emerging Cold War. And more countries are saying no, are refusing to, especially the bigger developing countries, the so-called BRICS and so on. They have made very clear that they're not going to simply follow one side or the other. But the smaller countries are also beginning to assert themselves. And the smaller countries are also beginning to say no, okay, in many different ways, which I won't get into right now. But the point is that US increasing interest rates forces everybody else to raise interest rates. So when some of you complain about, oh, the ringgit is getting very weak, why is it getting very weak? Because since the beginning of this year, thankfully, Bank Negara, the Monetary Policy Committee, has refused to raise interest rates. Okay? And by not raising interest rates, it has kept down the cost of borrowing for people who want to get involved in investment, as well as consumption. But this means that the ringgit has declined in value. Okay? So these are very difficult choices one has to make in this world in which we live. And it's precisely because these are very difficult choices that it is important for people to understand why these choices are being posed and what are the implications thereof. I'm sure that many of you, for example, who are supporting children studying abroad and so on and so forth, who are complaining because the ringgit is now lower in value. But at the same time, there are many people who would not be able to afford higher interest rates. This is a difficult choice. There's no choice. And there's no so look at what has happened. Inflation came down this year in Malaysia without raising interest rates. Okay? Why? Because the supply side disruptions were more or less stabilized. Higher oil prices, etc. All those things were more or less stabilized. So it's important to understand why this is the case. Okay? So this US Fed policy is The US right now has close to full employment. Singapore has close to full employment. Very few other economies in the world have close to full employment. We are not bad. We are actually quite close to full employment when you consider there are probably 6 to 7 million foreign workers working in this country. We are not very far from full employment. But the point is that you have a situation right now where the rest of the world does not have full employment. And this is going to mean declining conditions for a lot of people. And let us not forget that Malaysia, that since before the pandemic, Malaysia, like all other Southeast Asian countries, the #1 trading partner is no longer the West, not the Western countries. The #1 trading partner is China.